All right, well, let's get started because we have an exciting time to talk about today. Welcome to back to the class on Revelation. We're glad that you're here. We're going to be in Revelation 12 today. And remember that we just talked about the trumpets, the 7 trumpets and the warnings that God tries to give people. And remember we talked about how the first half of the book, the first 11 chapters of Revelation, are really about what we see. It's about us trying to deal with the problems of the world. And to us, that looks like what the big problem is, thanks. Us dealing with the world. But that isn't really what's going on. The real thing going on is a spiritual battle that happens. And so in chapter 12, we get our introduction by looking at the birth of Jesus as viewed from heaven. All right? So this is the story of the birth of Jesus from a different point of view. I'm kind of into a different point of view these days. My granddaughter the other day, 3-year-old granddaughter, she's looking up at me. You know, she's a little tiny. She's ittle. I'm big. And she's this little person just looking up with these, you know, little eyes that she has, and she's looking up like this, and she's going, and she's just staring at me, and I'm going, wow, she's seeing how much I love her, you know, and that I care for her. And she just looks at me and keeps looking at me, and then she says, Boppy, you got a booger in your nose. You know? It's all a matter of perspective. It's all a matter of perspective. Okay. All right. So you know, I kind of feel like with chapter 12 that it is so beautiful that we should just let it be. It's like looking at a painting and realizing this is perfect the way it is, and I don't want to tell you much about it. We were in Milan. We were looking at we were in the former monastery where Leonardo da Vinci had painted the Last Supper on the wall. And we were there looking at it, and I'm thinking, how much better could it get? Because it was stunning. And then the guide explained some other features of the painting, and it became even more stunning to me. So I hope I don't mess this up for you, because this is a stunning picture on its own, and I don't want to mess it up. All right, here we go. A great and wondrous sign appeared in heaven. A woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet and a crown of 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. All right? Let's identify who this is. The woman about to give birth. You notice she has 12 stars. What does our number 12 mean? 12 means our organized religion. 12 tribes in the Old Testament, 12 apostles in the New Testament. In Revelation, it's the number for organized religion. Who is the woman trying to give birth? Down here, she gives birth. She gave birth to a son, a male child, who will rule all the nations with an iron scepter. Who's that? That is Jesus. So what's the picture of who is the woman giving birth? Is what? Not Mary. Not Mary. The Jews, specifically the nation of Israel. So this is talking about a wondrous sign appears in heaven because it's God's people. God's people are there, and this is the Old Testament right here. God's people are clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet. God says, I will make you my nation, doesn't he? And God's people, she has 12 stars on her head. Her crown is made up of the 12 stars. It's God's people. This woman represents the nation of Israel, the Israel trying to give birth to who? Jesus. Now, how can you think of the nation of Israel trying to give birth to Jesus? It's what? You got to go from Abraham to Christ. You got to think of that, right? You got to think of that Jesus is of the house of David, and that house of David was trying to give, they're constantly looking for the Messiah, right? So this is a woman protected by God. She's clothed with the sun, the moon under her feet. She's pregnant and cries out in pain as she's about to give birth. Did the nation of Israel ever cry out in pain? This is the Old Testament, isn't it? Read the Old Testament a little bit. They're always crying out in pain. Because there still are. But they're looking for the Messiah. So this is the picture of the people of God waiting and looking for the Messiah, crying out in pain. Now, who doesn't want the Messiah to be born? Satan does not want the Messiah to be born, so we need to introduce him into our story. So we've got the woman, we've got the son, but then we got to get this picture. Then another sign appeared in heaven, an enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on his head. Let's read that with what we know 7 is. 7 is our number that means complete. He has complete domination. He has 10. 10's our number of power, and horn is a symbol of power. He has power, a lot of power, and he appears to be the one who is the king, the earthly king, you see. He has power on the earth and is the earthly king. His tail swept 1/3 of the stars out of the sky and flung them to the earth. I'll talk about that in a minute. The dragon stood in front of the woman who was about to give birth so he might devour her child the moment it was born. This is a picture of the nation of Israel trying to give birth to Jesus, and the devil standing there waiting for the child to come and going, I want to destroy this child. Now, was he almost successful? Sure. Think of this. Jesus had to come from Abraham to Isaac. Let's see. How many sons did Abraham have that were his real sons? 1. What if the devil had been able to convince Abraham at that moment, you don't have to give birth. You're going to sacrifice Isaac, okay? God isn't going to save you. We're going to end Isaac's life. What if the devil had been able to do that? He was standing there trying to devour the child. You see what I mean? What about if David's line had been eliminated? You realize how close it was with Mephibosheth? I got to be careful how I say that. Mephibosheth was the last of David's line. Do you realize they were down to 1? If one person out of the billion people on earth, millions of people on earth at that time had been eliminated, Jesus couldn't have come. The devil almost did it. Why? Because he has power. He has a lot of power. So you got this red dragon. Satan is the red dragon. He's trying to stop the birth of Jesus. But I love how this reads. She gave birth to a son, a male child, who will rule all the nations with an iron scepter. That's actually talked about with Christ in the book of Isaiah. Let's go on. And her child was snatched up to God and his throne. What did we just have there? You just had Jesus be born. You just had his life. And you just had his resurrection. All right? Jesus has now been resurrected. and he's at the throne. The woman fled into the desert to a place prepared for her by God, where she might be taken care of for 1,260. Now, who's the woman? The woman was the nation of Israel, but in general, it's God's people. So when Christ leaves the earth, what happens to God's people? Well, they're in trouble. Do you agree that? Do you remember what the apostles did when Jesus was resurrected? They scattered. Where did they go? Well, we're not talking about a desert literally, but we're talking about what did they have to do? They were afraid, weren't they? They were frightened. So they ran off and hid themselves. Now, what's the 1,260 days? We did that last week. You remember 1,260 days is 3.5 years. Why would we say that the woman goes into the desert for 3.5 years? And why would we count it in days? Because it's what? It's not forever. It's half of 7. 7 is complete. This is an incomplete amount of time. So as we read this as a Jew in 70 AD, do you see we totally understand this? This is saying we were trying to hide, we're fleeing because we don't want to be recognized. God's people are hiding, but she is taken care of for 3.5 years. Now, tell me, who else was taken care of for 3.5 years? What did you think of? When Elijah said, don't rain, how long did it not rain for? 3.5 years. What did God do for Elijah? He protected him. What did God do for God's people? At the time when Jesus was resurrected and they were doubting, what did he do? He protects them. So this is simply a time of protection. All right? Now, let's go on, because we get to the interesting stuff now. Was this interesting? But we're getting to more interesting stuff, because this really gets fun. And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. The dragon and his angels fought back, but he was not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. The great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was hurled to the earth and his angels with him. Then I heard a voice in heaven say, now just skip that for a minute, I'm going to come back, I'll explain it. Hang on to that. You're going, what in the world is that talking about? Easy. We'll see. Heard a voice, loud voice in heaven say, now have come the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ. For the accuser of our brothers, who accuses them before our God day and night, has been hurled down. They overcame him. Notice the tense. They overcame him, not they will overcome. They overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. They did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death. Therefore rejoice, you heavens, and those who dwell in them. But woe to the earth and sea, because the devil has gone down to you. Now, ignoring that part, what can you say about this? Who is this talking about? It's talking about Jesus. Jesus is the one who now has the power and the kingdom and the authority. He is the authority of the Christ. The devil has been hurled down by the Christians, because how did they overcome him? How did the Christians overcome the devil? By the word of their testimony. So it's saying that because the Christians have stood up and testified, they have overcome Satan. Now, what happened to them? They were killed. Right? Some of the Christians have been killed. There has been a period of persecution. That is certainly true of the early Christians. So, shall we try to deal with some of this? You like this? I kind of like the picture. Picture's great. Let's deal with some of it. Some people want to make this story Michael, this war in heaven, some people want to make that in the creation. What's the problem with the picture? How was he overcome? By the blood of Christ and by the testimony of the believers. So do you realize this couldn't have literally taken place in the beginning? Because if it took place in the beginning, think of how illogical that is. Then who won the battle? Well, Michael won the battle. Then why do you need Christ? You don't. If Michael wins, you don't need Christ. So this wasn't a war in the beginning. In fact, it wasn't literally a war at all. Because it couldn't have taken place after Christ, could it? Because after Christ, why do you need Michael? Michael means who is like God. Who is like God? Christ is. Who is the one who beats the devil? Christ does. So now I want you to think of Michael being like Christ, but here's what I want you to think of. I want you to go, we're going to go to the only other place in the Bible where it talks about, well, in clear language, Satan falling from heaven. Okay, now I want you to go to this passage because it's fun. People want to make a whole story out of this that isn't true. The story that is true is more powerful than the story they make up. So we will go to Luke 10. I'm going to be in verse 18 in a minute, but I'm going to be in Luke 10:17 to begin with. Jesus had sent out 70 or 72 disciples to go out and try to convince people that who Christ was and to bring them to repentance. In Luke 10:17 it says, the 72 returned with joy, saying, Lord, even the demons are subject to us in your name. So what are the 72 excited about? Jesus sends them out, says, I want you to do miracles in my name. What do they think? What's going on in their mind? Yeah, sure, right. You think I'm going to be able to do this? I've seen you do it, Jesus, but I don't think I'm going to be able to do this. I'm not really excited about this assignment. That's what they're thinking. They go out and they're even able to cast out demons. What has happened to the 72? They realize they have power. They realize that they've been thinking that they had no power, and suddenly they have power. You see, in their minds, they were thinking that God really wasn't the all-powerful God. But what did they find out when they went out? God is the all-powerful God, and if He tells me I can do something, I can do it. Now look what happens. This is Jesus now. When it says, and He said to them, Jesus says, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. I have given you authority to tread on serpents and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall hurt you. When did Satan fall from heaven? In this case. Right at that moment. Correct? When did Jesus say Satan fell from heaven? Right here. When the 72 came back and said, we can do miracles. That's when they said Satan fell from heaven. Because where had Satan been? In their heaven. Where was he when they came back? He was put away. He was out of their heaven. He was gone out of their minds because they realized now they had the power of the witness. Yeah, Chris.
hear even the casting out of demons. It's more the smoke coming from the mouth, spirits screaming away from the body. Do you have an interpretation?
Yeah, a lot of. It's difficult to look at demon possession in the New Testament because the demon possession is also mixed up with epileptic fits and things that we would call medical conditions in today's world. What I can say here is that what the passage is saying to me is they realized that whatever was causing these people to be ill, they were able to get rid of it. So whether it was really a demon possession, which it may have been, or whether it was an epileptic fit, they were able to cure things that they could not normally cure.
Does Satan still fall from heaven?
I think Satan falls from heaven every time we realize the power that we have. Because that's exactly what Jesus says here. When he saw Jesus, he says, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven because you put him up there and you think he's powerful, and in reality, when you go out and testify to people and you speak through the power of my word, that's when Satan is taken away from heaven. Now,
sorry, so it's not literal, it's a graphic description of Satan losing power.
exactly.
Or being taken from him, basically.
Yeah, he's losing power because you finally realize what's going on.
This is the other thing, too. I mean, I believe that Satan's power is in our willingness to believe him.
Right.
When we don't believe him, when we place God over Satan, his power is stripped from him. So the only power he really has is the power that we give him.
And that's exactly what Jesus says here. Yeah, Satan's power has been stripped from you because you are ceasing to give him power. Because we know that Satan really doesn't have the complete crown, does he? He doesn't really have the complete authority like he's described here. It's only in our view that Satan is powerful. And we can strip him of that. And when we do, he falls from heaven. Yeah.
Can we revisit just for a second? Michael?
Sure.
Michael was a real angel. At least he sure comes across that way to Daniel. He was one of the great princes. So why would John refer to Michael in Revelation and not mean Michael? That's kind of what it says.
I think that Michael in Daniel is referred to as the protector of God's people. You're waiting for the prince. Michael is detained while the prince comes in Daniel. And so what we have is, it's one who is acting on behalf of God. And in this picture, we're not really trying to focus on Michael. We're really trying to focus on one behaving as from God. So, could it be Michael? It could be literally Michael, but we realize it's really Christ through Michael. So it's all kind of wrapped up in there. Even there with Michael's power, you'd say it's really God acting through Michael and Daniel. I just want to say it's Christ acting through Michael.
So how does Satan get the earth to tempt Eve?
Okay, the question is, how does Satan get to earth to tempt Eve in the beginning? There's a lot of things that go on in the beginning that just aren't explained to us. But I don't think it has anything to do with the fact that I personally, I don't believe the devil was ever in heaven. I have a lot of problems theologically with that.
What's the motivation for the alternative view?
The motivation for the alternative view is that it appears to be, when you just read Revelation 12, it appears that it's talking about falling from heaven. But I'm trying to say that really when you think about it, it doesn't make sense. The motivation is people are trying to understand Revelation 12, and they really want to understand it, but it takes a little more depth, I think, than what they've looked at. That's my opinion.
Was Satan ever in the presence of God?
I don't think so. And all those are side issues. But in any case, the woman's taken care of. What happens is that he's there on earth, but then comes the salvation and power, and you notice it's exactly the same thing The accuser has been hurled down. How was he hurled down, that accuser who leads the whole world astray? He's hurled down. They overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony.
Well, the interesting thing, though, is that he is not completely overcome because he will have some power after this.
It's kind of interesting. He does have some power, but it's clear in the book of Revelation that the devil is not all powerful. God is clearly the one that's the powerful one and has control even over the devil.
Right. We see now he's going to attack. He's going to go after the woman.
Right.
And he's not going to be successful. We know that, but he still has some power. I mean, he causes a flood, and then the earth is opened up, and
Right.
it's literally, well, figuratively, I don't know exactly what's going on, but he doesn't just fall to earth and
No. He still has some power because look at this. Woe to the earth and the sea because the devil's gone down to you. And the picture of the earth here is it's not, you've now got the devil out of your spiritual lives, but the devil's still going to be here on earth bothering you. And the idea of the sea is the sea of humanity. So woe to all of us who are humans because the devil's going to be here to attack us.
Look at the entire thing in verse 12. Therefore rejoice, you heavens, and you who dwell in them. So who are those who dwell in them?
That's an important point. You're exactly right. The heavens and those who dwell in them, in this picture, who dwells in the heavens? We do. Christians do. God's people. The earth and the sea, this is the non-believers.
So verse 12 is really a summation of what you've been saying. I view this as two different pictures. Two different ways of viewing the same thing. So the one with the woman and, being carried into the deserts, and then Satan and being hurled down, and all of those are two different ways of looking at the same thing. Verse 12 is a summation of what's going on.
And I think that makes total sense. That's a good way to look at it. Because this is a summation of what's going on. And we'll go beyond this now, because what we're able to say is, indeed, watch out here on the earth and sea, because what we're going to get to next is we're going to explain this whole sea of humanity and what's going on.
When Christ was tempted, then was that, in essence, a figurative representation of our own temptations? He was out there, he was under stress, there were temptations, he could turn the stones to bread, he could call on angels to help him, all the kind of things that were there were his temptations, and that was Satan, in essence, it was Satan literal in that situation, talking with him and interacting with him. Or is it like the influences of this world on us and the things that are all about us?
That's a big question. I think Christ was literally tempted by Satan. I think that we are tempted in the same way, and Satan can become very real in our lives because we are so tempted by those things. That doesn't really answer your question, but it's a big deal.
Well, he has to have some kind of power because it clearly states in the Bible that the gate's wide. Obviously, he has some impact.
Oh,
Right? The story, it's all a personal story, right? It's like how it individually affects everybody. You as an individual, not the mass Christian lifestyle. It's how does it affect you because the gate is wide.
that's right.
So obviously there's a lot of people going through it.
Yes.
On a personal basis.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Actually, on earth, if no one accepts Christ as Savior, Satan wins all those people.
Everybody on earth is thought of as the non-believer, and that's why our testimony, we can overcome by the word of our testimony and by the blood of Christ.
And so in that very figurative sense that we're talking about, we dwell in heaven now.
Yes.
Exactly, we do. We dwell in heaven now in this sense Because heaven in this picture is where the believers are. And the earth is where the believers aren't.
Well, isn't heaven described as where there is hope and where there is no hope?
And that also works where there's hope and where there's no hope, because the believers are where there's hope. Now, we got to be careful, because heaven in other parts of the Bible may be used in a different way. But here in this particular sense in Revelation, heaven is the home of the believers.
Well, here on earth, even as Christians, we still have doubts, temptations, and even persecutions. But when we get to heaven, Satan won't be there. That's the difference. He's here, but he won't be there.
He won't be there, and what happens is when we have difficulty here, it's because of our non-belief. And so if we can maintain ourselves in a status of really believing and really seeing who the power is, then Satan can't tempt us. But it's hard to do that.
Right, because there is already here. I mean, heaven is already, we're already in the realm of heaven. As saved people of Christ, we have already started our lives, our lives of salvation.
That is exactly the picture given here. That is exactly the picture.
And isn't that the whole point that John is trying to make to these people? You will suffer, you will die, but Satan has no control over it.
And remember, that's how he opens the book. He's saying, don't seal up the words of this testimony, because this is happening to you soon. As soon as you realize who God really is and where you can be, where you are, and the power of Christ, then Satan is no longer in your life. He has been removed from heaven, and you are there. You can be with Christ right now. If you die, you're with Christ. If you live, you're with Christ. You're still in heaven because of the power of your testimony and because of Christ. And you're named in the book of life. And all that has happened to you now. Now, this is talking about Satan. We're back in Revelation. Because he has been thrown to the earth, he is filled with fury, because he knows his time is short. Short because as opposed to long. You don't want to hear that Satan is going to be able to destroy the people of the earth over long periods of time. What you want to hear is Satan's power is limited. His time is short. When the dragon saw that he had been hurled to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. Who's the woman? His church. He's chasing after the people who say they are God's people. The woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle so that she might fly to the place prepared for her in the desert, where she would be taken care of for a time, times, and half a time. That same 3.5. All right? Out of the serpent's reach. What is God doing for God's people? He's protecting them. He protects us. We have to stay strong.
He doesn't protect us in the way that the world thinks protection is. He's not telling these people at any time, you will not suffer. I will keep you safe at all times. You won't watch your children die. He's telling them that they live out of that realm, and their protection is eternal.
He's trying to convince us that we live in heaven. And we aren't citizens of this earth. And that is really hard for us to understand, because we see all the things going on and we're living our earthly lives, and it's not so great. In fact, at times it's downright lousy. Because that's what the earth is. Because what is happening is we're trying to get pulled down, but we are protected by God for the time of protection. Don't believe what you see, because what you see is not real.
That's why the Matrix.
Oh man, okay. Now, verse 15. Then from his mouth the serpent spewed water like a river to overtake the woman and sweep her away with the torrent. But the earth helped the woman by opening its mouth and swallowing the river that the dragon had spewed out of his mouth. Let's get what's going on in this picture. In the picture, what we have is the serpent is the father of lies, deceit. So we have lies and deceit that are spread about God's people. But even the earth, even non-believers, realize that some of these are just lies and deceit. So even the earth helps the woman by swallowing up some of these lies. The dragon was enraged at the woman, right? The one thing that Satan can't tolerate is God's people being faithful to God. And those are symbolized by God's people here on earth right now. And he's saying, I am frustrated that people still believe in God. I want to stop people from believing in God. So I'm going to go after them. And it says he went off to make war against the rest of her offspring, those who obey God's commandments and hold to the testimony of Jesus. In other words, I'm going to come after those people who believe in God and believe in Jesus.
You know, this is kind of a kamikaze attitude. I mean, I don't want to say I feel sorry for Satan at this point, but he's not going down without a fight, but he knows he's going down. And I'm just trying to picture, what would that feel like, to know I'm going out now, but I'm going to take as many people with. I mean, that is just pure hatred.
Yes. I think that's the exact description. It's pure hatred.
Mass murder.
It is.
Take out as many people.
I mean, you would like to think, well, I don't even know how to say this, that there was a possibility for him to even be converted, to think of the thief on the cross, he was saved. But it's inhuman.
He's kind of like Pharaoh, where his heart gets hardened, and the more encounters he has with God, the more hatred he has.
And the picture of Pharaoh is a really good one, because to the Jew reading this again in 70 AD, he would have that picture. And when you talk about the river spewing forth, they would think about Pharaoh with his army coming after him. They would think about all the things, because we'd already gone through those kinds of plagues. Yeah, the whole thing, the whole picture is trying to take what they're familiar with, but it's saying, the devil's going to lose, but this book is written to the believers. And the believers, frankly, the reason we have trouble in life is because we don't really believe that the devil has been limited. We don't believe he's been lost. He's lost. He's already been beaten. The picture that we have here is a beaten dragon, and he has been beaten by the blood of Christ and the testimony of his servants. And so what do we want to do? We don't want to picture Satan as beaten. We win because of the blood of Christ and because we testify to that salvation. That's how we win.
One of his lies is be afraid of me.
One of his lies is to be afraid of me. We don't have to be afraid of Satan. When we realize the power of God, we need to recognize the power of God in our lives. The problem is we don't realize how powerful Christ is and what he's already done.
That's one of the reasons why when we have a newly baptized person into Christ, one of the warnings is, now that you have become a part of Christ's body, Satan's going to attack you. But, you know, when we say that, all of a sudden, we're giving Satan power.
Right, and then Jesus said, well, no, you don't do it, you don't respond that way. I mean, the devil's going to send enemies to you, and you're to love those enemies. You know,
Maybe a picture that we ought to keep in our minds is of the demons that were cast out when Jesus was alive on earth, and how they would tremble and quake in the presence of the Lord. They weren't very powerful then in the presence of Jesus, and asked for him to get away from them. That's the power we carry within us.
It's the power we carry within us that's trying to be focused on in this passage. The devil, do you realize what the painting has done here in chapter 12? It's saying since the beginning of time, the devil has been trying to destroy God's people. And since the beginning of time, God has been protecting each one of us, down to individual people, so that his will would be fulfilled in this earth. That's how powerful he is. Even if there's one believer he could find, he protected that believer. We need to realize that we now have that power. God will protect us. We need to see how powerful God is, and that the demons are quaking at his, when they see how powerful he is. You can see here the devil is totally limited by God. He's been thrown down. He's now going to attack us here on earth, but it's just on earth. Because the church at this time is undergoing persecution. The whole book is written for the persecuted church. And what he's saying is, you're undergoing persecution, but realize I have won. And you win with me. Stay with me. But you see, I put 13:1 here because the beginning of chapter 13 really belongs with the end of 12. Most early manuscripts have it that way. And the dragon stood on the shore of the sea. Where's the picture now of the devil standing on the sea of humanity, looking out at the group of us, the sea of humanity, and saying, that's what I'm going after. And now we need to meet the dragon in person. Because we need to see how the dragon's going to personify itself in the first century, and to personify himself today. Because the dragon will take on different forms, because he can appear to be attractive to each, in many ways, to each of us.
I was just reminded when Jesus talks to his disciples in John 14, he talks about the fact that the Spirit was with them, because when he was on the earth, the Spirit was with them. But after he left, the Spirit was in them. And he says it so clearly, it's like the Spirit can't indwell you while I'm with you, but I have to go so the Spirit can indwell you. And that's exactly what we're talking about here, that the power will be, instead of being outside of us, will be in us.
That the power, instead of being outside of us, will be in us. And that is what a true picture is here of what's going on. Mm-hmm.
I'm in Bonn. I just have a question.
Okay.
All you can answer really quickly.
Okay.
You're saying you didn't think he's ever been in the presence of God. So his whole, how he ends up on earth, how he gets cast out of heaven in the very start, when he went from a regular angel to an evil angel, or how do you want to, can you just quickly say how that all happened? Because I'm confused on the
I didn't cover that. And I'm not going to. Yeah, I think that Job is a whole different deal. I think that Job is very much something to teach us a lesson. It's like a parable, and it didn't need to necessarily occur.
But then even if Satan's in the presence of Jesus, he's in the presence of God. So, I mean, I'm not sure if you were meant that way. You mean
I mean that God, I don't see how God, I have a theological problem with God being perfect and being unable to tolerate evil, having an essence of evil with him.
But you got the question, where does evil come from? Is God created?
Right. And all those questions I don't want to deal with, but I do want to leave you with a couple thoughts before I go away. Yes. Before I go away, I'm going somewhere and I'm not coming back next week. That's good. Okay, here's a couple things I want you to think about. Romans 6. We usually read it in context of baptism, but look at the power it tells us we have. Do you not know that all of us who have been baptized into Christ Jesus were baptized into his death? We were buried with him by baptism into death, in order that just as Christ was raised from the dead by the glory of the Father, we too might walk in newness of life. We have been united with him in a death like this. We shall certainly be united with him in a resurrection like his. We know our old self was crucified with him in order that the body of sin might be brought to nothing, so that we would no longer be enslaved to sin. For one who has died has been set free from sin. Well, that's powerful. We have been set free from sin.
That doesn't mean that we'll never sin.
That's right.
That's the power of it.
Exactly.
You can't be accused of
Exactly. We can't be accused of sin. Look at this. For this light, momentary affliction is preparing for us an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison, as we look not to the things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen. For the things that are seen are transient, but the things that are unseen are eternal. I like a lot of things about this in 2 Corinthians. It's really talking about this light momentary affliction is what I call life. And what's it's doing, it's preparing me for an eternal weight of glory. You know what? It's talking about, it's temporary, it's momentary. That's why we get the picture of 3.5 in Revelation. It's not complete, but what we will face in this life is so that we can see not the things that are transient, but the things that are eternal. And yeah, there's a lot of things I don't understand, but I do know this: Christ won. And however I want to view that, that means the devil is subject to what Christ is doing. And Christ wins in my life when I'm willing to get the devil out of it. But he's going to hammer on me, and he's going to hammer on you, and he's going to work on you this week. But Christ is there, and what I want you to realize is focus on the things that are eternal. Thanks for your comments. We'll see you next week. Oh, yeah, if those of you who can, help set up 5 round tables and 2 long tables. Okay, thanks.
Do it on this half of the room. We've got a home church having that thing right afterwards.